Metch, the Dean of the Columbia School of General Studies. Welcome to Columbia University for this very special opportunity to hear from Secretary of the Navy, the Honorable Carlos Del Toro. On behalf of President Lee C. Bollinger, Provost Mary Boyce, and all of us at Columbia University, I want to extend my warmest welcome to the Secretary, who you will see in a few minutes, who grew up just down Broadway in Hell's Kitchen, and I learned this morning has had a relationship with our Columbia University campus here on Morningside from his earliest days growing up here in New York City. I also want to welcome University Trustee Dean DeColius, who has been incredibly supportive of our student veterans here at Columbia. Welcome to Captain Timothy Gibney, the commanding officer of the NROTC program at SUNY Maritime, and to wonderful members of Secretary Del Toro's team, who I had the honor to meet earlier today. And of course, welcome to all the NROTC midshipmen and student veterans joining us today. I also want to take a moment to thank those who made today possible, including the event sponsors, the Columbia University Center for Veteran Transition and Integration, the acting director, Jason Dempsey, is here, the Columbia School of General Studies, the School of International and Public Affairs, SIPA, the Columbia University Office of the President, and the Office of Communications and Public Affairs, especially Ben Chang. I also want to recognize Jeanette Wing, Executive Vice President for Research at Columbia University, who is here today. And she made sure to say that we are very proud that several of our esteemed faculty's research is supported by the Office of Naval Research, and this research has helped to ensure our country's leadership in science and engineering. Columbia has had a long and storied history of connection with the military, which is part of what makes Secretary Del Toro's visit so meaningful. Columbians have served in all of the nation's major military conflicts. In fact, several of the first students enrolled in King's College, as Columbia was first called, served in the French and Indian War, and then Columbia's students actively participated in the Revolutionary War, including Alexander Hamilton. Notably, the Morningside campus served as one of the Navy's largest training sites during World War II. On this note, we are thrilled to have NROTC here on campus, and most recently, we hosted our annual Columbia Military Ball and honored our President Lee C. Bollinger's 20-year tenure and commitment to student veterans, including the return of Naval ROTC to the Columbia campus. Today, Secretary Del Toro was among the first to visit Columbia's new space in Kent Hall, where we opened the new Center for Veteran Transition and Integration, created by my beloved predecessor, Peter J. Ahn, and our GS Vice Dean, Curtis Rogers, where the Secretary had the opportunity to converse with NROTC students and student veterans leaders. I am so proud of this new center, and I'm proud to be Dean of Columbia University School of General Studies, which this school, GS, was founded in large part to provide access to a world-class education to the thousands of service members returning from World War II. Today, Columbia University is the educational home for more veterans than any other highly selective university in the United States. Columbia GS enrolls nearly 400 student veteran undergraduates, which is almost double the size of all the other undergraduate student veteran communities in the Ivy League combined. Columbia GS forged the path for highly selective peer institutions to recruit undergraduate veteran students, and our peer institutions are increasingly recognizing what we have known since our founding, namely that military veterans bring extraordinary talent and potential to the learning community. It is for all these reasons and more that Columbia is so proud and honored to host the Secretary today. Thank you for being here with us as we welcome Secretary Del Toro. I now want to welcome one of our best and brightest students, Grayson Noyes, to the stage to introduce the Secretary. And just to say one or two words about Grayson. Grayson is the twice elected president of the Military Veterans of Columbia University and a Marine Corps veteran. As a military police officer, he served in Okinawa, Japan, and went on missions to Mongolia, the Philippines, and South Korea. He is a fourth-year undergraduate political science major, chiefly interested in foreign affairs and conflict, who plans to attend law school next year. Grayson is interested in constitutional, international, and criminal law and hopes to serve as a prosecutor and eventually a judge. Grayson also works for the New York City Department of Veterans Services as a legal intern. Please welcome Grayson to do the introduction.
Thank you, Dean Rosenmetch, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grayson Noyes, and I'm the president of the Military Veterans of Columbia University. It is an honor to welcome everyone here today in the faculty room as we gather to hear the Secretary of the Navy, the Honorable Carlos Del Toro, speak. Secretary Del Toro was sworn in as the 78th Secretary of the Navy in August 2021. As Secretary, he is responsible for close to 1 million sailors, Marines, reservists, and civilian personnel, and an annual budget exceeding $210 billion. Secretary Del Toro ensures that the Navy and the Marine Corps are trained and equipped to combat our country's most pressing matters, from China's naval ambitions, climate instability, COVID's ongoing impact, to strengthening a naval culture of inclusivity and respect. Born in Havana, Cuba, Secretary Del Toro immigrated to the U.S. with his family as refugees and was raised just south of here in the New York City neighborhood of Hell's Kitchen. After receiving an appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy, Secretary Del Toro served an honorable 22 years in the Navy in numerous roles, which include the first commanding officer of the guided missile destroyer, USS Bulkeley, senior executive assistant to the director for program analysis and evaluation in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and special assistant to the director and deputy director of the Office of Management and Budget, where he helped manage the budgets of the DoD, the Department of the State, the CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, National Reconnaissance Office, and the Peace Corps. After retiring at the rank of commander in 2004, Carlos Del Toro founded SBG Technology Solutions. As CEO and president, he supported defense programs across an array of naval issue areas. Here at the Military Veterans of Columbia University, we facilitate service members' transition into collegiate and professional society by empowering our community to continue their service in whatever form that may be. The notion of lifetime service is embedded in all of us, and Secretary Del Toro is the quintessence of a lifetime of resolute and selfless service to the United States. It is my honor to give him a warm welcome to the largest military community in the Ivy League. Secretary Del Toro, welcome.
Thank you, Grayson. Before I begin my formal comments, let me just take a quick moment to tell you how special it is for me to be back here at Columbia. You see, when I first came to this country, we lived on 42nd Street between 11th and 12th Avenue in a tenement building. And as a young child, obviously, we didn't have much money or anything like that. But one of the things that my mother would actually do is put me in her stroller and actually stroll me around the campus of Columbia. And she thought it was a great institution back then. I know what a great institution it was back then, and it is even today. And so for me, I feel like I'm coming back home. So thank you. Thank you for that. And Grayson, thank you for that introduction and for your own service in our United States Marine Corps. From the Philippines to South Korea to Mongolia, you served with honor and distinction, and your continued service to our fellow veterans is testament to the adage that once a Marine, always a Marine. Now, I'll be reporting back to the Commandant of the Marine Corps that we have a proud Marine here at Columbia University. Thank you for everything you do for all the veterans attending this great university. There are more veterans attending Columbia today than at all the other Ivy League schools combined. Dean Rosenmetch, cabinet members, student leaders, and honored guests, I thank you for inviting me again to speak and for your hospitality during this amazing day here on this historic campus. To the midshipmen here today, thank you for answering the call to serve your country. The fleet and the force that you will join are as formidable as they have ever been, and I am determined to make them even more so. As our Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, said this weekend at Reagan National Defense Forum, American power, innovation, and values make the U.S. military the strongest fighting force in human history. I am truly honored to stand before you in one of the world's most prestigious centers of learning, in the heart of a city that has no peer, to share with you why our Navy and our Marine Corps are indispensable to securing our nation's future. We are a maritime nation, and American naval primacy is essential to meeting the challenges that we face today. It is no accident that I have chosen this day, this city, and this institution to deliver this speech. New York is indeed America's foremost maritime city. It's center of commerce and trade. And New York is where, as I said, I first came to live as a refugee from Cuba. I grew up here with my wife, Betty. Our naval career took us far away, but we took every opportunity to come home to family and friends throughout the years. And so when I was selected to command America's then newest warship, the USS Bulkley, I pushed hard, as only a New Yorker can, to have her commissioning ceremony take place here in the world's greatest city. And I was glad that I did, because the commissioning would come to mean more to the city and nation than I ever could have imagined at the time. I was on the west side concluding our last commissioning committee meeting aboard the USS Intrepid on September 11th, 2001. We received word that a plane had struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. When I stepped off Intrepid to call Betty from a payphone on the West Side Highway, I saw the second plane hit the South Tower. I found my way to Lower Manhattan and spent the next few days helping every which way that I could before eventually returning to the shipyard in Pascagoula, Mississippi, where the ship was being built. Due to security reasons, for weeks following the attacks, it was an open question whether the commissioning ceremony of our ship, the USS Bulkley, would move forward. But I was determined that this city, our Navy, our country would not be deterred by terrorism. I pushed hard for the ceremony to take place as planned. So 21 years ago today, on December 8, 2001, on Pier 88, my crew and I commissioned the USS Bulkley in one of the first major public events to take place in New York City following the attacks. I am honored to briefly recall this very special emotional day with all of you here at Columbia, because this institution has an extraordinary role in shaping our greatest naval strategists, our most articulate and influential advocates for the strongest Navy that the world has ever known. Their wisdom offers us timeless principles to help guide our actions even today. From Alexander Hamilton's advocacy for our Navy, to Alfred Thayer Mahan's The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, to Teddy Roosevelt's The Naval War of 1812, Columbia-educated thinkers revolutionized the way that we view naval power. They proved once and for all that both our prosperity as a nation and our security are dependent upon unfettered access to the seas. 25 years after graduating from Columbia, President Theodore Roosevelt would send the Great White Fleet around the world to demonstrate his maxim, and I quote, "The good Navy is not a provocation to war, it is the surest guarantee of peace." A portrait of his flagship, the Olympia, is displayed in my office. 3 decades later, fellow Columbian law alum Franklin Delano Roosevelt, whose picture adorns my office, led the country on the greatest naval mobilization that the world has ever seen. Through the naval acts of 1936, 38, and 40, America made early, timely investments in preparing our nation for World War II. President Roosevelt would ensure that Columbia itself would serve as a primary naval officer training center, as Lisa has mentioned, sending over 21,000 officers to the fleet that would win the greatest naval conflict in our nation's history. Hamilton, Mahan, TR, FDR, these giants all issued a clarion call for American naval primacy at key junctures in our history. Let me stand for a very brief moment on their shoulders as I tell you that today we find ourselves at another such inflection point, one that demands we renew our commitment to naval primacy as we chart a course through this century of intense maritime competition. 21 years ago, this weekend, the People's Republic of China was admitted to the World Trade Organization, an event of geostrategic importance that would over time reshape the world that we live in. In the past 2 decades, China has more than quadrupled its export trade and used its growing wealth and economic power to rapidly expand and modernize its military and its navy. I commissioned Bulkley into our fleet 2 days before China joined the World Trade Organization. In the years since, the People's Liberation Army Navy has added over 100 combatants to its fleet, a naval buildup that is a key component of its increasingly aggressive military posture. Today, they have approximately 340 ships and are moving towards a fleet of 440 ships by 2030. China's disregard for the rules-based international order is particularly troubling in the maritime domain, from the Taiwan Straits to the high seas. Our maritime competition will be increasingly global. In fact, the Department of Defense's recently released 2022 Military Power Report calls to China the most consequential and systematic challenge to our national security and to a free and open international system. And let me be clear that our disagreements are not with the Chinese people, or the Russian people, or the North Korean people, or the Iranian people. It is with the totalitarian governments that rule those countries. China is conducting active, aggressive maritime activities in the South China Sea that have the potential to undermine our system of international law, including the freedom of the sea, a foundational U.S. interest. Our Navy and Marine Corps team are meeting this threat on the sea, under the sea, in the air, and even in space every single day. I applaud Vice President Harris for traveling last month to the Philippine island of Palawan, bordering the South China Sea, and her visit to the Philippines Coast Guard ship and a Filipino fishing community. Her presence shined a much-needed spotlight on China's maritime bullying and its intimidation and coercion of local civilian mariners in the Philippines. The Vice President made clear America stands for respect for sovereignty and international integrity, unimpeded lawful commerce, the peaceful resolution of dispute, and freedom of navigation. To defend freedom of the seas, we must ensure our sailors and Marines have the capability and forward presence to stand by our allies and our partners. That is why I have directed our Navy and our Marine Corps to prioritize our investment and readiness efforts to make sure that our ships and our aircraft are always prepared to deploy. This approach will deliver the integrated deterrence at sea required by our national defense strategy. Our maritime challenges, however, are not just confined to the Indo-Pacific. Russia's army has faltered in the face of steadfast resistance by the brave Ukrainian people. But Moscow has not abated in its effort to control large swaths of the Black, Baltic, and Arctic seas, trying to intimidate and deny other countries the opportunity to exercise their rights to free passage. That is why 6 of 7 of NATO's priority operating regions are maritime focused, and NATO is moving to adopt its first maritime strategy. And so once again, we find ourselves in an era of accelerating global competition. We are at an inflection point, with critical choices to make to meet the challenge posed by China, Russia, as well as Iran, North Korea, and other nations. The National Security Strategy outlines a vision of a world that is free, open, secure, and prosperous, and calls for the protection of foundational principles of self-determination, territorial integrity, and political independence. The National Defense Strategy lays out 4 top-level defense priorities for the entire joint force. First, defend the homeland, pace to the growing multi-domain threat posed by China. Second, deter strategic attacks against the United States, allies, and partners. Third, deter aggression while being prepared to prevail in conflict when necessary, prioritizing the challenge posed by China in the Indo-Pacific region and Russia challenge in Europe. Fourth, build a resilient joint force and a defense ecosystem. Throughout our nation's history, the United States and Navy Marine Corps have proven themselves the most versatile instruments of national power. America's naval forces are unique as America's most timely, flexible, and forward-deployed force across the full spectrum of challenges, from naval diplomacy to strategic deterrence to resource competition to crisis and to conflict. That is precisely why our national defense strategy calls for when it refers to integrated deterrence and campaigning. Our Navy and Marine Corps integrate resources across disparate domains and elements of national power to deter adversaries and campaign forward. And they are doing so through a clear strategic vision centered on 3 enduring priorities. First, we are strengthening our maritime dominance so that we can deter potential adversaries and, if called upon, fight and win our nation's war. Second, we are building a culture of warfighting excellence founded on strong leadership that is rooted in treating each other with dignity and respect. And third, we're enhancing our strategic partnerships across the joint force with industry, with academia, and with allies and partners around the globe. Over the past year and a half, our Department of the Navy team has made irreversible momentum across our 3 enduring priorities. Let me explain how. With regards to strengthening our maritime dominance, it requires us to rapidly field the concepts and capabilities that create advantage relative to our pacing threat and the pacing scenario, and the sustainment necessary to generate integrated all-domain naval power. That is why we are making the investments now guided by the Navy Navigation Plan and the Marine Corps Force Design 2030 to ensure we remain the most lethal, capable, and globally postured force on the planet for decades to come. So let me share some examples. Just this past June, our shipbuilders laid the keel for the first of a new class of nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines that will underwrite the nation's nuclear deterrent all the way out to the year 2080. The name of that class is Columbia, and the first ship is the District of Columbia. What a great name. In July, we commissioned USS Fort Lauderdale, an amphibious warship that will help modernize our amphibious fleet and extend the reach of our Marines to fight from the sea wherever there is a need. And just this August, we began construction on Constellation, a new generation of frigates with the power and the reach to protect the vital sea lanes that power our global economy. And just last week, we marked our 100th year career carrier aviation with the conclusion of the first operational deployment of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest and most powerful aircraft carrier the world has ever seen, and has just returned from its first mini-deployment. Our most advanced fighter aircraft, the F-35 Lightning II, now brings 5th-generation stealth, multi-role, multi-mission reach, and power to our carriers, our forward bases, and even the decks of the aircraft carriers of our allies. Our surface fleet is deterring our adversaries and protecting international waters from the Indo-Pacific and the Baltic to our very own hemisphere. Soon, our newest Arleigh Burke Flight 3 guided missile destroyer will bring greatly enhanced warfighting capability to the fleet as well. Over the past years, our sailors and Marines have also demonstrated the immense potential of unmanned and autonomous vehicles. The Overlord surface vessel Ranger successfully transited from the Gulf Coast to the West Coast without an embarked crew. These unmanned surface vehicles will reduce the risk to our personnel, they'll lower our operating costs, and protect access to areas like the South China Seas. Early in my tenure, we established a new, first-of-its-kind task force in the Middle East at our naval base in Bahrain. Task Force 59 is rapidly integrating unmanned systems and artificial intelligence into maritime operations in the 5th Fleet area of operations in the Middle East, and we will soon expand that capability to other regions of the world, such as Central and South America and the Indo-Pacific. Our second enduring priority, building a culture of warfighting excellence, demands more aggressive recruiting, training like we fight, and retaining a strong, diverse, and healthy force ready at all times and focused on warfighting and leadership at every level. That's why we have expanded community and school-based outreach while simultaneously increasing media campaigns in underdeserved and minority markets as well. We must attract the broadest possible talent pool from throughout our nation, including more women to serve in our beloved Navy and Marine Corps. Recognizing that quality of life for our service members and families is inseparable from warfighting excellence, we have directed transformational investments in quality of life initiatives, infrastructure improvement, and support for families facing particularly difficult circumstances due to inflation. All of these efforts are centered on one goal: combat readiness, taking care of our people. It's what real leaders do. Our sailors and Marines are better prepared and more focused when they know that their families are doing well. Our third strategic priority, enhancing our strategic partnerships, sustains and expands our advantage by seeking to achieve seamless integration, communication, and collaboration with each of our partners. Among our government partners, we have strived together towards greater agility, adaptability, trust, and transparency in support of our warfighters. Globally, we have strengthened our relationships with like-minded maritime nations, deepening interoperability in order to enable mutual action to address shared challenges. Our actions in the face of adversity will also be long remembered by our allies and partners. Since the spring of this year, the Navy and Marine Corps have supported our Ukrainian partners as they continue to defend their sovereign territory in the face of unprovoked Russian aggression. Together, we have risen to the occasion. We have shown great determination, generosity, and creativity in support of Ukraine, supplying an unprecedented volume of capabilities to assist in their time of need. And we will not stop doing so. Over the last 5 years, the Navy and Marine Corps has facilitated development and delivery of maritime capability to Ukraine's military. In 2022 alone, the Department of the Navy coordinated the identification, adjudication, and delivery of over $1.3 billion in critical systems, weapons platforms, munitions, and support equipment to address critical Ukrainian needs. As a naval force, as a nation, we must continue to support Ukraine in the heroic defense of its homeland and the very defense of democracy around the world. Sailors, Marines, and civilians I am privileged to lead have made tremendous strides across all three of these guiding principles in the last 18 months, and I am thankful to each and every one of them. So let me highlight for you now some priority areas that will require increased focus in the year and the years ahead. Tonight, I am announcing my call to the Department of the Navy to accelerate our already impressive progress across the three previously mentioned enduring priorities by focusing on a series of initiatives that are critical to our success. I believe our increased focus on these specific areas will rapidly improve our warfighting capability and our capacity. This acceleration is essential to our ability to prevail in contracted competition, and God forbid if deterrence fails in conflict. We must first accelerate our efforts towards fleet endurance and resilience required to prevail in a high-end maritime conflict of any scope and duration by ensuring the necessary capability and capacity to refuel, to rearm, resupply, repair, and revive, all while being contested by an able adversary. Often overlooked or taken for granted, these capabilities are transformational to our sustainment and logistics requirements and are as important to winning as any weapon system we field or ship that we commission. Lessons from the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, in fact, bear this out. We will test our assumptions and take resolute action to make sure that we are ready. During my tenure, we will set the Navy on track to deliver the game-changing capability to rearm our warships at sea. Being able to quickly rearm our warships' vertical launch tubes at sea will significantly increase forward, persistent combat power with the current force. No longer will our combatants need to withdraw from combat for extended periods of time to return for vulnerable import reloading of weapon systems. Last month's successful demonstration in San Diego of at-sea missile reloading is an early step in the right direction and paves the way for expedited development. My intention is to perfect this capability and field it for sustained, persistent forward strike capacity during wartime. A second area of acceleration is to ensure the United States of America remains home to the most robust and capable shipbuilding industrial base in the world. To enhance our peacetime deterrence, we're improving our public shipyard performance and completing ship and submarine repair and maintenance on time. And there's a lot of work to be done here, but we're committed to the effort. We must return these vital national assets to the fleet as efficiently and quickly as possible. Our significant investment in the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Plan, known as SIOP, which is modernizing our 4 aging public shipyards, is a critical part of that task. We know that in a high-end naval conflict with a peer competitor, we will need to repair and even revive ships at tremendous speed. And we will need to do so as close to the fight as possible so that even damaged ships can return to battle quickly. The intense repair and revive demands of a high-end conflict in Asia will require significant shipyard capacity in the United States and also in the Pacific. Accordingly, we are testing our wartime assumptions and looking for opportunities to expand our public shipyard capacity at home and abroad. The ability to sustain combat operations also requires distributed and resilient cooperative security locations with strategic partners. As the Navy and Marine Corps team works tirelessly to ensure our forward presence, we are in intense global competition with China for strategic access and influence. That competition is particularly concentrated in the Indo-Pacific. To prevail, we will continue to innovate, leveraging our naval diplomacy to maximum advantage. For example, deploying amphibious warships with Seabee construction battalions to priority partners in the Pacific will help build island resilience to a range of risks, a goal highlighted by President Biden's joint statement with President Macron just last week. Improving ports and enabling enhanced maritime patrolling capacity from the modern airfields serve U.S. security as well as the island nation's individual interests as well. Combine these critical enablers of U.S. influence, posture, and readiness in the Indo-Pacific also are the core components of the Department of Defense's ability to deliver humanitarian aid and assistance in the region as the catastrophic consequences of climate change accelerate. Resilient, distributed posture to meet our operational needs and outcompeting the PRC for strategic access and influence in the Indo-Pacific go hand in hand. Our U.S.-flagged merchant fleet and our proud American merchant mariners are critical components of our national security. And I'm honored that leadership from SUNY Maritime and the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, as well as maritime industrial leaders, are in attendance today. A strong merchant fleet is essential to our entire joint force to effectively operate in high-end conflict. I support the Department of Transportation and its Maritime Administration's efforts to improve the nation's maritime security program. Our U.S.-flagged merchant fleet must be prepared to meet wartime sea lift requirements as well. The rebirth of a vibrant commercial shipbuilding sector would be a tremendous asset to the defense shipbuilding enterprise. Reinvesting in and developing a globally competitive maritime workforce is a national imperative. To maintain America's maritime dominance, we must invest in expanding our shipbuilding workforce and provide compelling opportunities for a new generation of American shipbuilders. The Americans who build our Navy are a national asset. We must invest in modernizing their training and unleash their full potential for innovation. We will move to establish programs to build capacity in naval architecture, engineering requirements, and lifecycle management for government and industry managers, as well as technical expertise in nuclear welding, robotics, software, and electronics, and additive manufacturing, to name a few. And I know much of that work is being done here at Columbia University. We'll also seek ways to integrate the shipbuilding expertise of some of our allies and partners. High-paying, high-skilled, blue-collar jobs that restore America's manufacturing primacy are an administration priority and are essential to the Navy's role in securing the nation. A third area of acceleration is the Department of the Navy's efforts to drive innovation across every corner of the enterprise. The best way to deter our adversaries is for the Department to restore its technological superiority. Over the past year, we have established key centers of innovation, including Naval X, with 18 tech bridges and 6 centers for adaptive warfighting to build cooperation with the private sector and our universities. Our newly established Marine Innovation Unit is tackling through tough problems such as contested logistics, battle space awareness, and the role of small craft in sensing and reconnaissance. And through partnerships with academia, industry, and government, our Office of Naval Research is driving scientific research and technology development across the department and at this very institution. To further accelerate these efforts, I am also standing up a Department of the Navy Science and Technology Advisory Board of highly qualified experts, nationally renowned leaders in their fields to prove independent recommendations on our science and technology portfolio. Throughout this journey, we must ensure that our efforts are interconnected and that ideas and breakthroughs flow effortlessly between the Navy and Marine Corps, from the lowest to the highest ranks, and from warfighters on the front lines to researchers back home. Education is the key connector for this work. Our educational institutions hold great promise and opportunity. Early in my tenure, I created an education task force comprised of leading scholars and warfighters to evaluate our naval education ecosystem. Their efforts are producing a bold new vision for naval education and innovation ecosystem. I'm also directing the creation of a Navy Innovation Center at the Navy Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, right in the heart of our nation's leading technology corridor. That will serve as a premier military education facility tailored to innovation and experimentation, serving as a technology resource for Navy and Marine Corps warfighting development commands, as well as a go-to partner of the defense industrial base, the technology sector, and academia, like here at Columbia. In conclusion, when I commissioned USS Bulkley here in New York City 21 years ago, the geostrategic landscape was radically different. Beijing had not yet stripped Hong Kong of its long-standing democratic freedoms guaranteed in the one country, two systems arrangement. In a poignant personal moment of hope that seems utterly unbelievable today, Russia's newly elected president, Vladimir Putin, closed Russia's infamous Lourdes intelligence collection base near Havana. On 9/11, great and small powers alike rallied to our side in a post-Cold War world, trending towards multilateral cooperation and expanding democratic freedom. A time before the seeds of escalating great power competition and the slide towards authoritarianism had not fully taken root yet. Today, totalitarianism and authoritarianism are on the march around the world, threatening all that we stand for. The United States Navy and Marine Corps team is on the front lines of defending the free and open rules-based international order against those who would cast us into a dark new age defined by the principle of might makes right. A world led by the likes of China, Russia, and Iran is not one that I want my children and granddaughter to inherit. And that is at the core of why I felt a call within me to return to New York today, a call in defense of freedom. Your Navy and Marine Corps exist, as they have since their founding, to protect freedom. And no city embodies freedom, hope, and opportunity like New York City. Like so many others fleeing oppression for a better life, my parents and I escaped the grips of authoritarianism in Cuba and found freedom here in America. It is personal for me. It is who I am because my parents instilled in me a steadfast belief in the promise and in the justice of a free society. As I toured your university this morning, fond childhood memories came flooding back, as I mentioned earlier. The democratic institutions that we cherish, of and for and by the people, gave me the opportunity to fulfill those dreams. The Constitution that Alexander Hamilton argued so fiercely for established not only the department I'm humbled to lead today, but a Congress that was chosen by the people. That Congress, in turn, has always ensured the students at my alma mater, the midshipmen of the United States Naval Academy, that they represent the American people from every district of the nation and from every background, including mine. I'll never forget the day my parents, who had sacrificed so much for me to succeed, were overwhelmed with pride by the news that their son, a child with big dreams from Thomas Edison High School, received the congressman's nomination to the Naval Academy. I wish with all my heart they could have been here 42 years later after that first humid plebe summer in Annapolis to see our Congress confirm me as my 78th Secretary of the Navy. They would have said, quote, "Only in America, Carlos, only in this beacon of democracy, this land of freedom and opportunity, getting straight to the heart of it, those are the principles upon which my enduring priorities are actually based. They are the foundation of my sacred obligation to you, the American people, and to those selected to represent you in Congress, to ensure that our Navy and Marine Corps are always prepared to defend those liberties, those non-negotiable American values wherever the nation's interests may be threatened. The Navy and Marine Corps team remain, after all, this nation's single most versatile instrument of national power. For this, I am grateful for the sustained bipartisan support across our great nation and on Capitol Hill for a strong Navy and Marine Corps. I look forward to working with old friends and new partners in Congress to advance the nation's security, with the Navy and Marine Corps supremely able, first and foremost, to deter all potential adversaries and if called upon to fight and win our nation's war. For as George Washington advised us in his farewell address in this, to be prepared for war is the most effectual means to promote peace. That maxim is as true today as it was 225 years ago. But we must, as Teddy Roosevelt urged at his historic Naval War College address a century later, not pay President Washington's maxim a mere lip loyalty, but rather let it sink deep into our own hearts. We owe nothing less to our sailors and Marines and to the American people, I can assure you. But I assure you that those Marines and sailors are trained, ready, and fully committed to defend us to the very last measure. It is not lost on me that today is the 81st anniversary of FDR's Day of Infamy speech, following the attack on Pearl Harbor. Another moment when the world shifted beneath our feet. But while that speech is best remembered for its opening, I believe the ending was more prophetic. With confidence in our armed forces, said President Franklin Roosevelt, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. His words ring true today. The unbounding determination of our people will never fail, no matter what challenge we have before us. And I believe it is fitting that I give the last word to perhaps the most famous Columbia Lion, Theodore Roosevelt. We ask for a great Navy. We ask for an armament fit for the nation's needs, not primarily to fight, but to avert fighting. To avert fighting. Preparedness deters the foe and maintains right by the show of ready might without the use of violence. We ask to be given the means to ensure that that honorable peace, which alone is worth having. Thank you all. May God bless our sailors and our Marines, our soldiers, our airmen, our guardians, and their families, and thank you for your support to all our service members. Thank you.
Welcome to everyone here. We'll open it up for some questions in a moment, but first I'm Jason Dempsey, proud veteran and proud graduate of Columbia University. I want to say, sir, it's been a tremendous honor to have you here today and to celebrate this special occasion for you and to hear your vision for the Navy's future, and, well, for America's future as well. You know, as you're talking, you started with a talk on deterrence. And then you went to the power of America as an example for free and open democracies. It's really hard to imagine right now, I guess, an example where, one, we're deterring authoritarianism and defending freedom than the conflict in Ukraine. I guess if you were to take a lesson, you know, for how the Navy adapts, what the Navy's learning from that, what are the primary lessons that we're seeing out of Ukraine?
Well, I think we have to be present for the Ukrainian people. They have fought valiantly over these last 8 months. Not just over these last 8 months, but we've invested a lot in actually training the Ukrainians on how to deter aggression for several years now. And I think those investments in their training has actually paid off. But without question, the will of the Ukrainian people to defeat the Russians has inspired, indeed, the entire world. And they really are fighting for democracy, not just for their own freedom, but for the freedom of all people who suffer under authoritarian regimes. And so it is incumbent upon us as the United States to continue that support, along with all the other countries and our allied partners in NATO and non-NATO nations that have come to the effort. That perhaps is the biggest lessons learned. I don't think that President Putin thought that we would respond the way that we did. And I'm quite sure that President Xi is paying a lot of attention to how the world has come together to defeat, Russia and its efforts to invade Ukraine.
So another thing in your speech that came clear was kind of, the love of those who make the Navy and Marine Corps work, right? Our people.
Absolutely.
We're in the midst of really good unemployment numbers, but of course, unemployment numbers always present challenges to recruiting. That's the short-term trend, but the long-term, We've seen exposure to military service decline just by virtue of the death of the World War II generation. We see lower propensity among youth to consider military service. And we're also presented with the dual challenge that almost 3 out of 4 young Americans aren't even qualified to join the Navy or the Marine Corps team. How do you grapple with that, knowing that personnel is everything?
Sure, yeah, it's a significant challenge, obviously, but it's always good to be a leader where the cup is half full and not half empty. And so I see this as a new opportunity, actually, to inspire this new generation of Americans and try to convey to them why service in our United States military services, but particularly the Navy and the Marine Corps, by the way, is a good thing, and why they should join. And I think the perfect example of that is the 30 or so midshipmen that we have here today. They could have made many different choices in their own careers, except they decided to swear an oath to our Constitution of the United States to become, in this case, mostly midshipmen in the United States Navy or Marine Corps. And it really is inspirational. So we in the military services in all of America have to do a better job to convey to this new generation of Americans why military service is important as it has been throughout our nation's history, obviously. And we just need to work better at that. I think the other thing that's important for our nation's leaders to perhaps not do is to bash military service, to criticize, senior military leaders and military officials who serve our country. It is not healthy. It's been going on now, not just military service, but public service in general. It's been going on now for 4 or 5 years, and we need to put a stop to that. We should never politicize these great young men and women who decide to serve in our military service.
Couldn't agree more, sir.
Yes, sir.
For those of you with questions from the audience, if you want to start, please come up to the microphones because we are live casting this, so we want to make sure that not just the Secretary can hear you, but all those who are online. As we wait for those folks to come up, I guess you've outlined a tremendous number of initiatives, challenges. I think it's the saying is probably fitting here, right? It's really hard to turn a big ship.
It is.
And you are making a whole host of innovations and adaptations across the Navy and Marine Corps. Out of all of these initiatives and all of the great things you're pushing forward, how, if you look back in, say, 4 or 6 years, what will be the one thing you'll want to see to define your tenure as a success for nudging that ship in the right direction?
Well, unquestionably, those individuals that as Secretary of the Navy, I get to choose along with the Commandant of the Marine Corps and the Chief of Naval Operations to lead our military services, the next CNO, the next Commandant, the 4 stars and 3 stars and even 1 stars in our service are critically important because they will define leadership well beyond the time that I'm serving as Secretary of the Navy. So those decisions are incredibly important, and we need individuals who can think strategically, and I'm investing a lot in professional military education across the entire enterprise in our war colleges, both in the Navy and the Marine Corps, and our Naval Academy, our Navy Postgraduate School, at institutions across all of the universities across the United States, because it's the development of that type of leader, both officers and enlisted, that we need to make the strategic choices so that they can actually be successful and deterring us from going into conflict, and if having to go into conflict to win those wars. I need them to think strategically, and that's a very important investment, and I'd be proud if that's all I accomplished.
Yes, sir. I think we've got a line. All right, over here on the left first, sir, over here on the right side of the stadium, our left. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Can I go ahead? Okay. So, what you've talked about today in terms of threats to all of us, it concerns me greatly, but it doesn't concern me as greatly as something else I'm thinking about, and that is the whole notion of asymmetric warfare. I mean, you can see aspects of that going on today with, efforts at dividing the country, whether they come from internal sources or external. Efforts to undermine political institutions, to undermine the values of voting and so on. And I am wondering what is being done. You know, you talk about amounts of money being spent and efforts going into keeping the armed forces upgraded, but what is being done about the possibility of all sorts of potential asymmetric actions that are, if not just as dangerous, potentially more dangerous?
I couldn't agree with you more, in fact. And it's obvious that Russia, China, North Korea, Iran have all taken advantage of this asymmetric warfare for their advantage, right? And that's not to say that the United States hasn't also made major investments to try to counter that in every possible way, and we need to continue to do that. So the warfare that takes place, or the deterrence, I should say, that takes place in the cybersphere, in space, for example, are incredibly important to us deterring our adversaries from accomplishing what they want to accomplish. But I think you're very astute in pointing that out, and as well as ensuring that our electoral systems are safe and sound and protected so that the American people could always have the confidence that they're voting the way that they should.
I'd like to turn it over to another young veteran and Columbia student here on the right.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Alexander McCoy, Marine Corps veteran. I'm a history student here at Columbia. A year ago, when 13 of our brother and sister Marines and sailors laid down their lives in the evacuation from Kabul, one of the things that many of my fellow Marines, I remember, said to each other was that this was the first time in many years that we understood what it was our friends were dying for. And I think it's very important that as we look forward to and plan for the potential conflicts of the future, that we understand the conflicts that we have just fought. And so my question to you, sir, is what do you see as the main lessons that you take away reflecting upon the conflict in Afghanistan? And what are you doing to internalize those lessons within the department, particularly given the revelations of things like the Afghanistan papers in the Washington Post, the revelations of the Special Inspector General for the Afghanistan Reconstruction that have revealed a great deal of challenges, I would say, with the strategic and policy operations of our military? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for your own service. And thank you for studying history. The Department of the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Navy, we need engineers, we need scientists, we need all those wonderful things, but we also need great historians who understand conflicts of the past and to apply those lessons so that we avoid them in the future. And I was thrilled, obviously, to be confirmed 100-0, by the way, by the Senate, and become Secretary of the Navy on August 9th. On August 15th, however, Kabul falls, and I'm immediately faced with the evacuation of Americans and many innocent Afghani lives from the airport at Kabul, obviously. And yes, that fateful day where we lost 13 brave Americans, 11 Marines, a soldier, and an airman. And my wife and I stood at Dover to recover those bodies when they came back home. For me, the lesson that I learned from that is that as civilian leaders, civilian national security leaders, and for senior uniform leaders, it's really important that we very carefully think through the decisions that we make so that we can explore all the different courses of actions that we have available to us to recommend to the President of the United States and to the Secretary of Defense. And in so doing, we'd be very objective about the possibilities, that we fully understand not just the primary consequences, but as well as the secondary consequences that go into our actions, so that the brave men and women who serve in our forces will never have to sacrifice their lives for naught. Those brave men and women, just like all of the veterans who served over a course of 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq, served very, very proudly, and they answered their call to duty. And I'm very proud to be their Secretary of the Navy today, and America should be very thankful for their service. But yes, we have an obligation to learn the lessons of the past, apply those lessons so that we don't, again, repeat them in the future. So thank you.
Going back here again to the right, sir.
That's me. Thank you. My name is Wilson from Harlem, Manhattan. With climate change, it's predicted that the Arctic Circle is going to melt more, and China is predicting or trying to come up with a polar Silk Road and stuff. What do you think would be the consequence of that, and is the Navy ready for a potential conflict because of the opening of routes in the Arctic? I mean, is there any strategy for that? Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we're very closely following the melting ice packs, obviously, in the not just the Arctic, but the Antarctic as well too. Paying close attention to what's occurring. We're also making major investments. I was very proud early in my tenure as Secretary of the Navy to develop a climate strategy to address all the issues of mitigating the effects of climate across the board. Obviously, it has a very direct impact on our Navy and our Marine Corps. Just a month ago or so, I actually broke ground at a project at the Naval Academy, investing nearly $30 million or so to fix the seawall and to try to prevent it from being able to address the rising seas there in the Chesapeake Bay, for example. But we are making also tremendous progress. I'm very proud that, for example, United States Marine Corps Base Albany is the first Marine Corps base that has become fully self-sufficient in terms of its energy needs by investing in technology, solar panel technology and other technologies to allow it to be completely self-sufficient. And of course, when we're generating more electricity, we provide that electricity to the local communities as well. We've done similar projects as well too in Miramar. And so we're very excited about some of the technology investments that we're making. It's an existential threat to the world. There's no question about it. And many of our small island partner nations in the Indo-Pacific. So when I travel and I speak with leaders from those countries, their two most significant threats are climate. In many cases, the outlying islands and their archipelagos or the waters are rising above the island height, and villages are having to be moved to more higher ground. And then the second threat is the threat of illegal fishing, again, unfortunately, by China. China is doing away with the fishing stock off of, in South America, off of Ecuador. You know, they're changing the ecosystem completely in the Galapagos Islands. It's a real threat. And when you have 100 to 300, fishing vessels that are fishing just outside of often a poor nation's extended economic zone, that's having a real impact on those countries' economy. And so we're trying to work with those countries to provide unmanned technology and other resources to better combat those illegal fishing fleets that are out there as well too. So it's a real significant threat, and we're paying a lot of attention to it.
The Secretary is being very gracious with his time. We'll try to for sure make it through this line up here, but if you could keep your questions quick and we'll...
And my answer's short.
No, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Midshipman Pepperman, second class. I'm from New York City NROTC. And my question to you is, you mentioned in your speech warfighting excellence and combat readiness. And I believe that an important aspect of those is being able to identify and correct our mistakes. So my question is, what are you and your staff doing at your level of leadership to move away from the zero defect mindset and move towards implementing the Navy's policy of get real and get better?
You stole the words from my mouth. It's about, good answer. Next question. It's about get real, get better, right? And, in order for you to confront the challenges that you face today, and this applies to the military, it applies to a company, applies to any organization, right? You've got to be honest with yourself about the things that are not working well. I focus most of my time. I've talked about a lot of great things that we're doing, but I focus most of my time on the things that aren't working well to try to make them better, right? Well, the first step in that process is basically admitting that something's wrong, right? Not just looking for somebody to blame on why it's wrong or why it is the way it is, but to try to work collectively so that, everyone in our almost million person force and fleet has the confidence that if they surface a problem to our attention, we can then be transparent about it, take it seriously, address the root causes of why something isn't working right. I approach this kind of with an engineering mindset. What is it that fundamentally is wrong that we need to fix at the root of this, not just look at sort of the secondary consequences, but what's fundamentally wrong that needs to be fixed, and therefore work together as a team to fix it, right? Now, when it comes to zero defect mentality, there are times when we have to apply higher standards, certainly for those that are in command of units and ships and aircraft and things like that, and especially when there's loss of life at play as well too. But you're right. Just because one makes a mistake doesn't mean that that mistake should necessarily ruin that, especially if you're a junior officer, that officer's career or that enlisted person's career as well too. Because otherwise you won't be able to embrace get real, get better the way that I think we should. You take one last one?
Sure.
As long as it's an easy question.
All right. I think we can take two. Are you in line too?
We'll see.
No, that's okay. That's all right.
We'll make you the last one then.
Good afternoon, sir. Andrew Bartholomew, U.S. Dempsey vet and Columbia grad, class of 2016. The DoD recently announced the launch of an Office of Strategic Capital, along with various other initiatives across the Department of Defense to foster defense-focused innovation at early-stage companies. These initiatives seem to focus in part on utilizing private sources of capital to further our nation's strategic interests. I'm hoping to get your thoughts on how you envision such a public-private partnership working and how it could address the various needs you described today.
Excellent question, and this is a very new strategic initiative for the entire department. One of the things that we struggle with in the military is actually that valley of death. You have a small startup company that has this great idea about how to transform a problem set that we have, and they've come up with a solution. But it's really difficult to take it from that small idea and concept to the acquisition process, which sometimes can be very burdensome, right? And so this office is actually structured to allow those startup companies the resources necessary and the time necessary to be able to introduce those technologies to the right people throughout the Department of Defense and afford them the resources so that they won't go out of business necessarily, especially when it comes to technology that might not necessarily have a commercial aspect to it either, that are very high-risk areas for us. And so we would then, in a very fair and appropriate and legal way, afford that company to be able to seek the resources, the financial resources that it needs from venture capitalist companies, basically, to sustain them with sufficient amount of time to be able to transition that technology to the department. So it's a very creative program. It's new. We're going to learn as we go along, get real, get better. I'm sure there'll be many changes made to it as we go along, but I'm very excited by its potential. And for those of you who might be small businesses out there, please know that the Department of the Navy is very small business friendly. And the entire Department of Defense is. It offers tremendous opportunities to small business owners, whether you're selling bananas, shirts, or aircraft carriers. I'm sure that we have a requirement in the department for your small business to do work with us. And we're looking for more non-traditional government contractors to come in, businesses to come in from all backgrounds to work with the Department of the Navy.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I want to apologize. I'm not a Columbia grad, or I went to Fordham University. My mistake. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I am a 10-year Marine Corps veteran, 2 deployments as well. But my question in terms of the lack of the new blood, let's say, coming into the military, do you think that the veteran community is kind of an untapped resource and maybe can help out in some ways with recruitment?
Absolutely. I need every midshipman. I need every veteran in this room. I need every American in this room. And if you're an international citizen, you could help out as well too, to identify somebody in your own family, your neighbors, your friends, to help recruit. Again, with a focus on the Navy and Marine Corps, okay? But to help recruit folks to serve our nation in uniform. And we also have to do a better job in transitioning our veterans into the Reserve Corps as well too. Traditionally, we haven't done a good job in that regard, and so we're making changes now to try to do a better job. If you don't want to work full-time in the military, the reserves are just a great opportunity to come in and train and really professionalize yourself from a military perspective, and to do your reserve weekends, and then usually 2 weeks out of the year you deploy, and It's a way for you to be connected while still being able to work in the private sector as well, too. So, you know, a lot of people take advantage of that, but we need more people to take advantage of that as well, too. So thanks for your service. And Fordham is a great university as well, too.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Well, sir, we really sincerely appreciate the amount of time you've taken,
Thank you.
your words of insight, your wisdom, and your willingness to share with midshipmen to retirees alike. I do have a couple gifts for you, but first, if we could give a warm hand to the Secretary for being with us. Sir, the first gifts, of course, is some Columbia swag.
Thank you.
Representing Columbia and the
Thank
School of
you.
General Studies, which was built, of course, to serve the veteran community.
I love it. You know, I have 4 children. They're all adults now, and I tried to recruit 2 of them to come to Columbia, but I don't know. They wanted to go elsewhere. I thought coming to Columbia would have been the right choice, but I still love where they went. I still love where they went. Absolutely. I brought them here to try to recruit them to Columbia, of course. But I never got a chance to get the sweatshirt. So thank you very much for the sweatshirt. I very much appreciate it.
Sir, this other gift is, it's slightly more personal. I know this weekend you're heading to the Army-Navy game.
That's right.
I just want to give you a small token, something that you may put on your motorcade on your way to
Excellent.
Philly, something you can
Excellent.
fly with pride.
Okay. Can I open it?
Absolutely, sir. Please
Not
go.
going to get me in trouble or anything like that, or? Oh, look at this. No, 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 no. Can I get everybody to say, go Navy, beat Army?
Oh.
Let me tell you how talented our midshipmen actually are. So just this past week, if you haven't read it yet, you got to get on Google and you got to look at this, okay? Our very capable midshipmen in training, aviation training, actually they rented 3 Cessnas, they flew a mission over West Point and dropped thousands of leaflets and ping pong balls that said quite the opposite of the flag that I had over my back. Go Navy, beat Army. But I'll tell you, it's a wonderful game. I encourage everybody to watch it, whether you're rooting for Army, whether you're rooting for Navy. It's really what's great about this country. And, you know, I really do encourage you to watch the game.
Yes, sir.
No. How do you think I became Secretary of the Navy? Goodness gracious.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll burn this for you.
That's great.